Hello and welcome to another edition of SCoRe Talk, our weekly webinars where we host discussions with communications leaders on contemporary issues. This is our 7th edition, and I want to thank Reputation Today for helping us make this series possible. I also want to thank OneSource, thanks Sandeep, and MxMIndia, thanks Pradyuman for helping us reach out to the communications fraternity. The hashtag for this event is SCoRe Talk, hashtag SCoRe Talk if you want to tweet anything or if you want to post on any social media, anything insightful that you find in this conversation. If you're watching this on Zoom and you have any questions, feel free to put this in the Q&A box that you will see at the bottom of your screen. This is also being live streamed on our YouTube channel. And if you know anyone who could not sign up, they can watch it there with a 20-second delay and without the ability to interact with our panel. We have an incredible panel today, and with their conversation being hosted by Pradyuman Maheshwari, Editor-in-Chief and CEO of MxMIndia. Pradyuman, thank you so much for moderating this session, and over to you.
Thank you, Hemant. Good evening and welcome to this 7th edition of SCoRe Talk. The topic for this edition of SCoRe Talk is measurement priorities during a lockdown. Now, we all know the effects of COVID-19 that have been felt globally as also in our country. We are in our 3rd lockdown and metropolitan India is set to see the 4th edition very soon. So what should measurement in the PR and the communications business entail in a period when there's a national lockdown? And what happens in a scenario when newspaper distribution has been impacted considerably in the big cities? I know measurement is beyond the column centimeters that once existed, but the fact that the mentions in the leading pink paper of the country is a lot that corporate India relies on. However, the right messaging, corporate and brands can work a lot towards the entities. They also work towards forging alliances towards our stakeholders. And clearly messaging ensures that it works beyond CSR and various cosmetic activities. Spacing out the words in your brand identity, donating PPEs and meals, all of this is good, but how much does it impact perception is something that needs to be seen. So what metrics can PR and communication professional use in this period for the right outcome? Share of voice, sentiment analysis. Let me not get into the nitty-gritty and leave it for the experts. We have with us here a galaxy of business leaders. Abhilasha Padhy of ATDB Communications, Aseem Sood of Impact Research and Measurement, Rammohan Regulapati of UltraTech Cement, Rishi Seth of 6 Degrees BCW, and last but not the least, Gideon from Flipkart. Sarah, I hand it over to you to speak to us about your opening remarks on this issue, and then I'll hand it over to the others. Sarah, over to you.
Thank you so much, Pradyuman. So everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. I know there's a lot of conversation happening in the environment, and thank you for your time and being part of this discussion. So this, of course, this whole COVID-19 pandemic is a once-in-a-lifetime experience, hopefully for all of us. But I think as communication professionals, the learning curve for all of us has been fantastic. And on a good day, without a crisis, the discussion on measurement of the impact of PR is quite a entertaining one that we can spend quite a few hours on. But during a crisis, it takes on a different dimension altogether, and hence this panel discussion. So as we start off, I think it's important for also to step back and realize that every company has its own way of looking at how it measures or monitors the impact of its communication campaigns. And Flipkart is also unique in that way. At Flipkart, we have an average of about 5,800 articles that appear on us every month. And so safe to say that, it's not about the volume that's something that we want to keep track of, but it really is about, how we've been able to make sure that our messages that we want to convey are being delivered, and how we can also make sure that our tonality is balanced. Now, over the last couple of months, e-commerce has really seen a sea of change. It's been very, very different. Like all companies, we have been impacted, but it's been very fluid for us. We're working in an extremely dynamic environment with our objectives changing practically, from day to day with evolving scenarios, with new guidelines and directives by the government. But I think for us, what we've tried to do is we've tried to maintain keep our messages that are slightly elevated from the individual activities that impact us on a day-to-day basis, and really focus on how e-commerce can help in this scenario by promoting social distancing, and also communicate the kind of safety measures that we're taking as a company. And of course, there are a lot of other pieces that we're doing with business updates and partnerships in the ecosystem, because that, of course, keeps the momentum going. And in a 24/7 news cycle, monitoring has been especially critical for us. I think it's not been about the volume of coverage, like I mentioned earlier, for us, but it is about how things are breaking by minute, and guidelines by the Ministry of Health, by the Ministry of Home Affairs, developing healthcare scenarios, what competition is doing, has really helped us plan towards our PR outcomes and preempt what communication we want to make. In any crisis, it's also essential, for us, and for us as a company, it's no different. There is a time when you have to shift from a reactive approach to a proactive approach. And that's something that I feel will be very, very relevant for companies to measure their effectiveness of their communication programs at the end of this. Maybe this is not the time to do it, but at the end of it. What we've done actually at Flipkart is we've used our owned media platform, which is Flipkart Stories, to take control of the narrative very early in the entire crisis. We started doing this around March 16th, where we decided that we had to have one true voice of the company, giving updates to its multiple stakeholders across consumers, sellers, and the media, to make sure that our messages were extremely straightforward and effective. So if I have to say what has really been critical for us in terms of measurement, it really has been about real-time monitoring, which is always critical, but even more critical right now because practically everything is breaking online. And listening and tracking conversations effectively, also working with a lot of third-party influencers to try and present our views. And when I look at the objective of what we want to achieve, because it is evolving, it's a constant live kind of a measurement that we're seeing. But I think at the end of the entire piece, if we really have to sit back and discuss, how effective are we, it's about making sure and trying to evaluate how clear were we when we were communicating, how relevant were we when we were communicating, and how effective were we. And I think that is something which is done best at the end of a crisis. But as we live through it and go through it right now, a lot of focus on real-time monitoring for us. Thanks.
Thank you, Sarah. So tell me, is life easier for you around the lockdown, or was it easier back then?
Definitely back then. It's been extremely exciting for us. I think it's really brought out the best in our teams. Our teams have really worked very, very hard. Definitely can say this has been a very, very exciting time for us at Flipkart.
Great. Thank you very much. Ram, over to you. How's life for y'all at UltraTech?
Very good, very complex, very challenging, but exciting. Thank you, Pradyuman. Sarah, thank you so much for presenting the corporate perspective on what the action has been, and particularly from a measurement perspective. I will use the opportunity, now that you've spoken about that aspect, I will use the opportunity to share a few thoughts, a few learnings that we've had in the process of the last 2-3 months. This has been an unprecedented situation for all of us globally. Yeah, and of course, such an unprecedented, as Sarah said, hopefully once in our lifetime, hopefully. There have been a lot of learnings. I wanted to share a few of these in relevance to the subject we're discussing today. The first one is that trust is the premium. Yeah, in a crisis, people seek safety. They seek products, services, leaders, organizations that they can rely on. And so trust is not at a premium, but it is the premium. Any comms or PR work that we do during such kind of situations should be aimed to consolidate trust. It's really not about differentiation or positioning. We hear a lot of that. Yeah, it's really not about that. It's at a fundamental level, it's about trust. Yeah. The second one is lead with integrity. It could be two aspects. One, about us as professionals leading with integrity, and two, about us being led by integrity in what we do. So in life, situations are not black and white. more so in a crisis. It's not easy to judge between good and bad decisions. Sarah spoke about the challenges of navigating the situation, and it's not easy to judge. Definitely more so in a crisis. When our actions and decisions are guided or informed by fundamental principles, they are likely to hold us in good stead in diverse situations or over the longer duration. Particularly true for crisis. Leaders in comms and PR fraternity, we have a bigger responsibility to demonstrate integrity in actions and decisions for the younger professionals who work with us. This applies particularly for comms and PR teams when they're engaging under pressure in a crisis situation like this with their leaders or clients respectively. Partnering for value. We hear a lot about this, but in a crisis situation, this comes to the fore. The client and leadership team, in many ways, they move into the driver's seat of all organizational level communications. So it's not like a peacetime. They really move into the driver's seat. PR and comms teams will be under tremendous pressure, one, to understand, and two, to match up to these changing expectations of the leaders and clients in quickly changing context. We've seen, all of us have seen that. Everyone will be out of their comfort zones, not just us, but the clients and the leaders. There'll be several competing interests at play. The simple principle, as the thing that came as a big learning for us, is to focus on value. More about delivering value than about seeking to be valued. A crisis typically creates a lot of insecurity, and we may lean towards being valued, but the bigger learning has been stay focused on delivering value. Stay focused on complementing rather than competing. The fourth one, catalyze the change. None of us know where this is headed. Yeah, we're all learning along the way. We are adapting, we're evolving. Yeah. But as comms and PR team, we can deliver better value only when we understand the context, the ecosystem, the industry, the organization. It's important for us to be alive, not just individually, but with our whole team, whether at the agency end or at the client end. What is happening around us? What are the big trends? And key to have an enabling point of view. An enriched perspective always helps to engage decision makers for better influence. This is a challenge that we always have. These are conversations, these are difficult conversations. And at that point of truth, if you are able to bring an enriched perspective to the conversation, it makes a lot of difference. Experiment and evolve, that I would share as the fifth learning. There's no better time to experiment than a crisis. It may sound counterintuitive, but it is true. As long as we remain true to the fundamental principles, a crisis will allow us to try new things, to experiment. It provides us the opportunity to learn new skills, and I'm sure all of us have experienced that. For me, at a very basic level, from the technology of engaging with teams or web tools. Yeah, I must admit I wasn't so good at it. We have Aseem, who was an expert on the panel on that. I read his article, and it helped me a great deal. Embracing new ways of doing things and trying new ideas. The sixth learning, culture of creativity. And this is not something that we can do overnight, but it's important to give focus to it. If you want innovative ideas and compelling content, very critical in managing a difficult situation like this, we need to have and need to continue to nurture a culture of creativity. It is about nurturing curiosity, imagination, and courage. Of course, curiosity and imagination are our childhood pals. Some of us may have forgotten, but this is a good time to reconnect with them. Courage, of course, it's up to each one of us. The courage to overcome one's own ego. A lot of times we need to have a lot of unlearning during such a situation. The courage to question or challenge our leaders, our clients. The courage to own up mistakes and to allow for mistakes. Seventh learning, Sarah spoke about it in reference to the word ecosystem. So embracing the ecosystem, I think that's very, very important. I would have used the word leverage, but I'm a little anxious that it might give a wrong idea of what is intended to be conveyed. Simply put, we should not be lone warriors. However good we are at our job, we should try and engage through the ecosystem, build a coalition based on trust, leverage the collective ability of stakeholders in the ecosystem to bring positive change. Advocacy, in some sense, when we talk of ecosystem or embracing the ecosystem, advocacy is the convergence of individual interests for collective benefit. No better time than a crisis for this. The final one is the need to think. One of the things all of us would have experienced is how our lives have got busier than it was before we got into the pandemic or the lockdown situation. So we tend to have a situation of being very busy, but may not be as productive. And this is typical of a crisis situation where we are always running to cope up with the changing situation. It is very important for us to pause because reflective action is key. Our ability to zoom in and zoom out as we engage with each other, with our teams, it will help us to course correct, because what may have worked yesterday will not work tomorrow. And given the changing context, this becomes very critical. Allowing for thinking time doesn't necessarily mean inaction. It, more importantly, can result in purposeful action. The leaders should focus on communicating the why. And this is very critical for us as comms and PR leaders, particularly being able to convey the why of what we are asking our teams to do, more than just focusing on the how or the what, which of course is the easier part. Finally, if we expect our teams to be able to deliver and navigate the situation on our behalf, they're only going to feel more empowered when they're clear on the why, because that will help them drive outcomes. These are some of the general, overarching thoughts and learnings that I wanted to share, Pradyuman. Hopefully over the Q&A, I'll have the opportunity to share on specifics on what we are doing at UltraTech and Aditya will approve.
Thank you, Ram. Thank you, Ram. That was very interesting. Abhilasha, over to you.
Thanks, Pradyuman. Thanks so much. Thanks, Ram. That was a really good, insight into the kind of endeavors you are taking at UltraTech. And, all of us over here have been in PR for a considerably long time, and crisis has been a part of our lives, be it at a brand level or at a country level. But this current situation is unique, unknown, and still unfolding very, very fast, both in terms of the certainty, the scale, and the scope. This is unlike anything that any of us have ever come across. Brands are still working, as to how to adapt their communication strategies to the current structure, depending on the size, the relevance, and the context. They are responding sometimes they are reacting. But one thing that has come out very clear for us is the need to shift from promoting, or communicating inwards to a focus which is outwards to the brand purpose and how it actually answers people and helps them in the current situation. A very important facet of brand communication, which is usually confused with just CSR, is corporate reputation, is corporate citizenship. And that is something that needs to be brought to the forefront at the current point in time. We are actually advising our clients to take a step backwards and see how they can address the need of communities that they are functioning in and demonstrate how they're going beyond just being a product, a platform, or just a company. And one such example is, a company that actually created a platform for blue-collared workers, wherein they could find newer avenues after being retrenched, and is actually helping them, upskill, providing them a future in the workforce. There are also brands which have pivoted away from the core products. For example, a liquor brand that we work with is actually now creating hand sanitizers and giving out free to healthcare services and the healthcare sector at large. They and other such brands will, of course, see traditional, measurement and metrics or traditional awareness increase. But what will stay with people is the brand trust, the fact that they came out of their way to help them in the hour of need. And that is very, very critical right at this point in time. I think given how fast communication objectives and strategies are changing, it is very, very critical for brands to establish or measure how to track their brand health. We at ATDB in the last few months are using a mix of really interesting metrics, such as measuring social engagement, research and surveys, brand sentiment analysis, to reassess communication, not just after, but before we launch into any campaign. We are trying to gather as much data to arm our clients with insights when we take a decision of what we want to go out the user with. This is to create both contextual and relevant storytelling, and which drives back to the entire brand purpose of a company that we are working with. We're also using third-party data, economic surveys, consumer spending information, because we want to arm them as they enter a new normal. Because the new normal will have no space for vanity metrics. It has to be data, and that showcases how the health of the brand is doing. And people are not going to forget this moment. And when we come out on the other side, it is very, very critical that the reputation of the brand is measured and not just numbers.
Thank you, Abhilasha. I thought data is finally what makes up for the vanity.
Actually, data is the new oil now. So vanity is going to be the oil, and data is going to take over completely.
Great. Thank you very much.
And when I say data, I'm not talking about number of clips or share of voice. This is data about consumer spending, about what the consumer wants.
Very much. Rishi, over to you. Your insights.
Thanks, Pradyuman, and thank you everyone for your opening remarks. So, I concur with everyone that this is once in a lifetime episode for all of us, hopefully. And that means a lot of old rules and the ways of doing things need to be broken. So static comparisons of time period that, okay, from January to March, quarter on quarter, year on year, or 6 month to 6 month comparisons don't stand any good from a measurement point of view, since that is the topic of the day, because no COVID happened before. So you really can't benchmark what is happening right now to something that has happened earlier. The second thing that creates more complexity to this is the fact that instead of battle of wallets and share of voice, you are going for hearts and minds of people. As the speakers before me, articulated, it's more about trust, authenticity, empathy. That's what brands want to communicate today towards all stakeholders, starting from employees to customers, partners, so on and so forth. So they're fairly intangible things that you want to communicate today for long-term reputation impact. These are not short-term transactional relationships that you want to form or communicate right now. So fundamentally, what's happening is that the environment is very dynamic, and again over there, I guess there are 4 phases that this COVID has in itself. First was safety, which we've all been through. The second is renew, where everybody's trying to figure out now what to do in this new environment. The third will be revive, and fourth hopefully will be flourish. So as people are doing the safety first, that was primarily around employee safety, customer safety. All the communication that went out was around, how are we securing everybody's lives? As a Prime Minister said, "Jaan hai to jahan hai." From there, we are moving on to now renew. People are coming out with new offerings, new regulations are coming up. Today, the finance minister, I believe, has announced some more. So there will be a phase of renewal. Everybody will have to come up with new, ways of doing business. Some sectors like Flipkart have been lucky that they've allowed to operate even through the lockdown, but they've for sure have had to change a lot of ways in which they do business. So all this needs to be then replicated by communication and measured by communication, and all of it is very, very dynamic. And again, the question in front of management in terms of communications people and marketing people is how much time and effort needs to go into measurement right now versus actually managing the situation and putting our time and our bandwidth to actually doing all this change, going through all this change effectively. I think the big things that need to be measured and validated at all times going by the communications team is, are we being authentic across all our channels? You saw one incident, it's not my client, disclaimer, but CureFit had this big faux pas of giving a big donation for CSR, but then not meeting its commitments towards employees, even though they had done a huge fundraising. Now, if you are not authentic across and within the organization, there is some disconnect that reflects very quickly externally, because audiences are are looking at you very, very closely. So every step needs to be taken with great caution, and therefore I think the measurement also needs to be in terms of making sure that what have we said, what are we going to say, and planning very well ahead, so that you don't have to get into a crisis when none is needed. So I would suggest to a lot of clients or to our colleagues that be more careful around how you're running your programs across the board. What are you saying? It's never been more important to say what you say, do internally and reflect that externally, because what is going to happen internally is going to come out externally very well. So measuring employee sentiment is also part of communications today, more important than it was earlier. So I think new paradigms of measurement need to be brought in. We've all talked about in the past that how integrated we need to be, how 360-degree measurement needs to happen and not only share a voice. I think it's going to be true today and in the future more than ever before. I think I've taken up my time and I hand it back to you, Pradyuman. You're on mute, Pradyuman, I think.
Sorry, our clients listening to you about with your recommendations, especially when they want some messaging to be done, which you think is not very interesting, because it's all a new normal, right? So nobody knows what to expect and what to be said.
Overall, I would think clients are listening more during a time of crisis. Normally, under normal circumstances, a lot of them say that, we know what we want to get done, and so go ahead and execute what we are asking you to do. But I think the amount of exchange and consultation has definitely improved during this time because everybody is in uncharted waters and everybody is trying to bounce off, all possible scenarios before they proceed on campaigns or communication initiatives. So I think clients overall, definitely I would say they are listening right now and they're looking for the best counsel across the board. And in that sense, I think boundaries are also being broken.
Great, thanks Rishi. This discussion is about measurement and we have the measurement man here. Aseem, all over to you.
Thank you, Pradyuman. Good evening, everyone. And this word measurement actually is understood differently by different people. Most of the time, we've seen that people understand the word measurement as a report card of what we have done. How well did we do? Did we achieve the right objectives or not? But for the purpose of today's discussion, I want to request you all to look at the word measurement as a combination of research and insights. And since I work at a measurement firm, what I've done is I've picked up 5 ideas that we have seen coming from our clients who include corporates as well as public relations firms. And what I'll do is I'll quickly share a small presentation which I've prepared for this. Pradyuman, tell me when you're able to see my screen. You're on mute, Pradyuman. Oh yes, you can see your screen. Thank you. Okay, so first thing, any measurement campaign that we run for our clients is only as good as the objectives that the client has set for themselves. I'm sure all of you are aware how you set good measurable objectives. In an objective where you clearly define who are you trying to target, what are you trying to change in their behavior, by how much are you trying to change that behavior or awareness, and by when are you trying to achieve it. With the onset of COVID, a lot of this has gone for a toss. People have changed the timelines in which they will achieve what they had initially set out to achieve. People have even changed what they decided as the target. So a lot of companies have even reduced their earnings estimate for the year. And all of this is leading to communication professionals also changing their communication objectives. So the first thing that I learned from my clients is that try and articulate what has changed in your communication objectives. I've shown on the screen a set of 4 priorities that clients have. The ones in blue, 1, 2, 3, 4, are showing the priorities before COVID set in. And imagine that the first priority was that you wanted to run awareness campaigns for the new products that you are launching this year, which are going to drive your revenues in the year. The second one was strengthening your corporate messaging. Third one was internal communication and employee-related communication. And fourth one was CSR. And suddenly after COVID, what we see is that there is a change in the priority. And we have seen this coming from a lot of our clients. CSR and society commitments have become the first priority. Employee-related communication and even internal communication has come up to number 2. Now, if this is what is happening to your priorities, are you actually making changes in your communication objectives? In fact, on this idea, I want to ask you all, think about it. Ask yourself this question: did we write down the changes that we made in these objectives that we have for our communications program? I can promise you every one of us knows what are the changes or what is the approach that we're taking, but have we articulated that? Did we write it down? Writing it down is very, very important if you want to run a good measurement program. That's one. Moving on to number 2. Typically, people think measurement starts after you've run a campaign. And we believe measurement actually starts even before you've set up your objectives. With the changes in COVID, a lot of our clients started trying to understand what has changed in the stakeholder expectations that they have. So they're trying to talk to employees, customers, partners, but what has changed? So what are the things that clients have done? For example, I've taken an example from Kanta Media Group, wherein they've conducted a survey of a large number of people and found that 75% of the respondents felt that companies should not exploit the health crisis to promote their brand. 77% people expect brands to be helpful during this pandemic. 75% of the people want to know how brands are reacting to the current pandemic. And look at the last one, the 78% are urging brands to take care of their employees. So the example that Rishi shared of CultFit, wherein they were raising money on one side and not giving proper money to their own employees, had they seen surveys like these or collected information like this in terms of expectations of their stakeholders, they may have stayed away from doing that. If people are not doing surveys, probably you don't have the budgets, then what they're doing is they're doing interviews. Several of our clients have come back to us with changes in their communication programs and messages saying, this is based on what we have learned from interviews. We have interviewed, especially internal client leaders, managers, and employees. Using information from there, they are able to pick up new messaging, and that is what they communicate to us. Again, a question for everyone here. Post-COVID, did you make any changes? What did you do to learn what has changed in terms of expectations of our clients or other stakeholders? So this is item number 2. Third, before we start to measure anything, we need to listen. And I think post-COVID, one thing that we need to do is we need to listen more and more than what we have normally been doing. And I'll give you an example. In normal days, what we were doing, we were using a set of keywords to monitor what is appearing on us, what is appearing on our competition, what is appearing on industry bodies. But what has happened post-COVID is now we are not just listening to business-related issues of the competition. We are also looking at what are they doing well, or what are the mistakes that they're making with respect to COVID. Several of our clients have told us that they realize that some of their competitors jumped into making announcements without realizing what could be the impact of those announcements on different stakeholders. In most of those cases, the CEO did not consult the communications manager before making an announcement. And they realized these were the mistakes that competitors were making, and we should not make those mistakes. Post-COVID, what are the kind of additional keywords that we are being requested to add? So companies are adding not just competitor names as keywords, but adding other companies that they believe are doing well in the times of COVID. So they want to know what is being written about them. What messages are they pushing out? They're also trying to monitor issues like COVID and employees. We don't know who's doing well when it comes to COVID and employees, or COVID and policy, or mental health issues that are coming up now. So people have started monitoring that also to listen in more. Next, people are looking at social media, looking at their own channels and trying to understand what is it that employees are commenting on our own platforms, on Twitter, on LinkedIn, to really understand what their concerns are. And also starting to look at what other stakeholders are saying on social media. Now, again, question for you. Post-COVID, did you or your team sit down and think, what else do I need to listen into? Do I need to make any changes to the tracking brief that I have, using which we are listening news from print, online, or social media? Next, point number 4. Outputs and outcomes, these are both important when it comes to crisis situations. Typically, a lot of times we've seen people say that we don't like counting clips. We don't like counting volume of articles. We don't like counting share of voice. I can completely understand because outcomes are far more important. But during crisis, when you have to react very, very quickly, it becomes very important that you start counting outputs also. What I've shown on the screen is the valid metrics framework. Going from top to bottom are rows in which you can see public relations activity. That is what you've designed as an activity that you're going to do for yourself or for your client. The green row is intermediary effect, row number 2. This is where any storyline that you've built, you communicate it to a journalist or a blogger, and he actually writes a story based on that. And the third line is target audience effect, which is after having read the story, how were you able to impact the awareness levels of that individual or stakeholder, or any behavior that you were able to change about that stakeholder. From left to right, you have the typical marketing funnel wherein you're moving your stakeholder from a state of awareness to understanding, to consideration, to preference, and finally to action, which is what you desire. Now, outputs typically lie in row number 2, volume of clips. Did the story appear or not? I wanted to talk about what are the things that we're doing for our employees. I spoke to a journalist. Did he actually finally write the story or not? Trust me, in short run, outputs are also very important, because if the story doesn't appear, nobody's going to get to read what you've done. But in the long run, you start to measure outtakes, which is change in awareness or understanding of stakeholders, or outcomes, which is change in behavior of people. So during crisis, especially current crisis, do not discount outputs. They are also very important. And over a period of time, you will be able to measure outcomes to understand whether those outputs were able to help you change awareness levels or behavior of the stakeholders that you wanted to reach out to. Item number 5. This is the right time for you to actually review your measurement approach and tactics. And I say this because the first thing that you can look at is scope. I talked about the Kantar survey earlier. The survey also revealed that web browsing amongst their stakeholders is up by 70%, and social media usage is up by 61% since the corona pandemic started. Now, if I was the one running a communications campaign, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that I include social media or web also in it. There is a possibility that I already had it, but was I measuring it? If I wasn't, then I need to start measuring it and add to the scope. So I need to relook at the scope. 2, reporting frequency. During pandemics, speed is very, very critical. If you were earlier getting a weekly report, change it to daily. In fact, today we got a call from a client who said, so we want our report to come to us every hour, because they were facing a challenge. Next, formats. Review your formats, because if earlier you were basing everything on a PowerPoint deck, maybe it's time, in order to work with speed, you come over, you accept an email summary instead of a PowerPoint deck. Also start using word clouds to identify themes if you have large amount of text available. So using technology tools to try and understand what is it there in all that large number of stories. Also look at the methodology, because your messaging has changed. You want to analyze messaging with speed. Start looking at automated coding and automated sentiment analysis tools, because that is something that can help you get the answers with the right speed. I learned these tips actually from one of the board members at Amec called Nadine Vernon, when she shared these examples with me. The question for you is, are you thinking about all these things? Have you actually questioned any of these during this time? If not, you may want to do that. Last step, which is actually a bonus, which is something I learned from another colleague of a friend of mine, Nikhil Day, is about be ready to suspend your agenda. This is the time when you need not push your agenda all the time. And I'll give you a very light example, but a shameless plug, which is somebody told me if you want to contribute an article to Reputation today, this is not the right time to write an article on measurement. Your article on measurement can wait. Right now, everybody is doing Zoom calls. So you better write an article which talks about how can people look better on Zoom calls. And that is something which will be accepted more. So I had to suspend my agenda to talk about measurement and write about something which was not related to measurement directly. So these were the ideas that I wanted to talk about. Thank you.
Thanks, Aseem. Thank you very much. And I know we are running out a little bit on time, but we have some time for a few questions. Aseem, you mentioned about output as against outcomes, and you know that people are looking for output also. How does it really impact? Ram, I would ask you this question: how does it really impact your world that print media is not really reaching out to the people that you would want it to reach out to?
So I think I would refer back to the last slide which Aseem spoke about, which is suspend your agenda. So in many ways, once we moved into this scenario, the initial days we were only trying to cope up, to figure out what the situation is about. And I think everything that we were doing before we got into the situation automatically actually stopped. I mean, sanity prevailed, and we were very clear that we needed to focus first on the safety of our employees and stakeholders. And so our communication in many ways, whether it's output or outcome, we said we need to realign everything that we were aiming to do to doing the right thing for the current situation in the interest of all stakeholders. So I would say that in phase one, it was all about saying, how do we ensure the safety of our stakeholders? I wouldn't say that we were looking at any time at that point in time, we were looking at measurement of our communication. It wasn't on the agenda.
I think you're working with an evolved organization, so perhaps you don't look at the.
So I'll just tell you another aspect why that's possible is so. For example, between Sarah and me, if you look at it, I'll just share one thought and say why this works differently. In case of in industry that like e-commerce, or say hospitals, or say pharmaceutical companies, in a situation like this, the convergence for them between consumer and citizen was very strong, in the sense that by providing their products and services to the consumers, they were serving the citizens. And this convergence of serving the consumer and serving the citizen became a natural fit for certain sectors to be able to leverage their business agenda with a very heightened, I would say, it provided them a context to do it in a way that resonated with the audience far more strongly. There were some sectors where this convergence was far-fetched. And we saw some examples of some companies, desperately trying to see how they could leverage this in spite of this, difficulty for them. And we also seen how it's been counterproductive. I will not take names of any brands or companies. So something that's well highlighted to, one-off incidents where some companies really had to, on the social media, a day or two of bearing the brunt. It was all because incidentally the sector they were in didn't allow them for the synergy of, serving the consumer and serving the citizen. And I think even in the first category of sector, some companies have done it really well. And some companies probably they got late into the game, or they didn't see the change in the context as well, and probably tried to keep focusing on their regular stream of business. I just wanted to share this thought, and you're right, Pradyuman, to that sense.
Sarah, have you had to recalibrate your your own yardsticks towards measurement and towards what is the output that is generated? Because eventually, for an organization like Flipkart, and which is living through these very tough times, every bit of output, whether it's the whatever be the media, is very critical.
Right. So, what we've done is that we anyway have a process in place that keeps regular tab of the kind of coverage that we're getting, and we're not touching that. But for us, it's real time has become absolutely essential. So, I know there is the crisis is creating a situation right now for us to respond and to actually take a lead very quickly. So our objectives have also changed literally from week to week of what we're doing on a comm space. So when we first entered the lockdown, we actually had to, if you think about it, e-commerce companies faced issues about people moving and delivering products. Then we were delivering essentials. Then we were allowed to deliver non-essentials, and then we were not allowed to deliver non-essentials. And now you're delivering essentials and non-essentials. So it's been quite an exciting time for us. But because of that, our objectives have also changed very, very quickly, and it's been very dynamic for us. So we have objectives that we are working towards, and we are looking at our performance or how impactful we are in terms of being able to achieve those objectives. And I think I should just leave it at that. But basically,
I don't envy your job, Sarah, at all. But tell me, at the end of the day, you are also in all ways answerable to your management. Are they are they accepting the new reality in the media order?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think one piece that's extremely encouraging is that at Flipkart, I think the entire management team has great and immense value for communication as a function. And, we're part of all critical conversations. And it's the interesting part is that corporate communications works with teams that lead communications across different tracks that are not traditionally, CopCom pieces. We work very closely with marketing, with consumer communication. We work very closely with the CX teams when they're responding to customer queries on social and various platforms. We work very closely with the seller community as well. And the management is extremely supportive of comms. So even they understand, and I think they have a very, very strong understanding of the environment in which we're operating. And they're completely in alignment in what's happening. It's not about, why hasn't this happened? It is extremely partnering, working with the management team at Flipkart.
So they obviously don't do a flip when things are not happening as they are. Aseem, you wanted to say something.
Yes, I wanted to answer the first question that you asked, where you said, if the print is not reaching the audiences, what about outputs? And the reason I want to take this question is because print is not the only way that corporates are able to reach out to the stakeholders. In fact, we all know that online newspapers were available, blogs were up there, but at the same time, the importance of own channels has grown, and especially own digital channels, wherein people using their own Twitter handle or their own blog or even on LinkedIn have started communicating with the right stakeholders, depending on the platform. And now even TikTok, we've seen how the government of India has started a TikTok account. You look at Instagram, wherein there was news about Instagram celebrities talking about supporting anti-COVID efforts and doing videos around that. So all these are outputs. The outputs are on different mediums, and you can still go on and measure those outputs also.
Rishi, what is your view on this thing? Are people accepting the new reality that print in the print form doesn't exist and other media are there? Are they happy with just that?
Yeah, so I think everybody's realizing that print is not going to be so mainstream as it used to be in the past. In the post-COVID era, definitely own channels, as Aseem just said, and digital is going to get more prominent. And measuring that and giving an integrated picture in that measurement is going to be very important. So I think the other issue till pre-COVID had been that, print was tracked and measured separately. Broadcast was a different channel of measurement, and digital was giving its own dashboards. I think more and more what the clients are wanting to see are integrated dashboards. So they're saying, if this is a message that we sent out, overall, what is the resonance of that message, and what is the kind of absorption of that message? Is it being accepted, rejected, or whatever? but giving me siloed information is not helping me. So help me put together, and that's where we need to work with people like Aseem, is to come up with integrated dashboards which provide all three channels: your own channel, which is digital largely, and again on video formats, on text formats, and so on, and on the external format, external media. But again, give an integrated picture, because really they don't have time to assimilate and make sense. As Sarah was saying, you have to act and react every week and come up with a, what are you going to do next week in dynamic businesses? So if it's going to take a lot of time to get those reports in and make sense of them, the next plan cannot be formulated very quickly. So that's going to be a new learning where I think we have some work to do and get help from smart people like Aseem. But go in front of clients with that.
Go ahead, sorry.
Sorry.
Abhilasha, do you see this the new normal of the integrated approach that Rishi is talking about, and Aseem saying that, well, digital exists, own channels exist. Is that being readily accepted by the fraternity and more importantly by the people who pay?
Yeah, so we'd already seen the move. Say in the last 1 year, the focus on owned channel had increased quite a bit. We were and we are working with a lot of clients to actually help them formulate messaging which is across all platforms: owned, paid, earned, social, everything. What COVID has done is it has really increased the momentum for acceptance. For example, if you're working with a college which is pushing towards its admission times, and print is no longer working, not just in terms of a news piece, but also in terms of advertising, then all students are on Quora. And that needs to be a part of your entire communication strategy. There are discussions being done on Facebook groups and communities. Parents who are the decision makers are on WhatsApp. So, we had already started moving the platforms towards this, and now for us it's an easier sell. And I think unless it is, we work with a lot of startups, unless it is focused completely at investors, which needs to be necessarily on print, for which any which ways right now is not the time, we see the acceptance increasing. And as we see, owned platforms will definitely become a very, very powerful tool to tell your stories.
We don't have too much time, and there are quite a few questions that are here. We have a question from Durgesh Garg, who asked, due to cost cutting in view of COVID-19, we've seen organizations pause their measurement programs. Is that advisable? What is your advice to such companies? Aseem, have they paused their measurement programs?
We've heard some people have. And again, you remember I started my talk with the example that a lot of people have different ways of understanding or looking at measurement. People who look at measurement only as a report card have stopped looking at measurement, but people who look at measurement as an input for research and insights for planning, they have actually started investing in measurement.
And what is the pie like? How many people are looking for measurement as a report card versus the others?
Okay, honest, on-ground facts are the new projects have dried up.
Okay, no, but in terms of people who are looking at measurement as a report card versus whatever else that you are talking about, and whatever else that one should normally look at, what is the ratio like?
More than 50% people are looking at it as a report card only.
Sarah, what is your view about measurement? Is there a pause, and what is your advice to companies?
So I'm going to actually just step back from my role at Flipkart over here and speak on this, because I mean, my role over here has also been just 6 months. But if I also draw upon the experience of what I had in my previous organization, I think it depends on organization to organization and how they view the measurement of this. It is definitely something that I believe in, because I think ultimately, like Abhilasha was saying initially also, data is very important to base your decisions on. And it's also very important at some point of time to use that information to make decisions and also showcase the work that you're doing, because this unfortunately is a situation that our industry faces, that you can't, people have a short-term memory about communication. You do a great project, it'll run for a month or two, And then after that, you forget about it. One crisis hits and that's it. So I think it's also important to use it as a reference point to keep track of what's happening. Also use it as a base to plan for the future. I'm actually very interested in what Aseem was talking about, and Abhilasha also mentioning about using the insights-based piece when you're entering into a project. That would be very interesting for me to explore. I haven't done it as yet. But I think it really depends on organization to organization, how they look at it. My personal view is that it is essential, it's critical to both look back in retrospect and also look forward to have a view of what you want to achieve.
There's a question from somebody who wishes to be anonymous for Aseem and Abhilasha. When will a digital measurement dashboard be made available to the industry? And Aseem, where does AMAC stand with the digital dashboard right now?
Okay, so see, dashboard is a tool, and frameworks are the concepts which drive those tools. The frameworks are already there, and it's just about using technology to convert that framework into a tool. In fact, you'll be surprised that already we are offering dashboards to our clients which combine online as in digital and the print mediums. So I think the answer is that they are already available. The level of complexity that different people are able to offer is probably different, but yes, they are already available.
This question is to anyone, again from an anonymous attendee, is apart from healthcare, which industries are showing growth using digital channels of communication? Rishi, would you like to take this?
During this period, technology is a big sector. So, I would say companies like Microsoft, Google, Facebook, the OTT players. So a lot of anything that you can do while sitting at home and basically run your life certainly becomes more important. So if you see the share price of Airtel, for that matter, or Jio's fundraising, it's earth-shattering, and that's because people do realize that technology is going to be a big part of our lives. So I think anything that technology either enables or technology provides us, something like e-commerce or fintech payments, all those things are doing well right now. Traditional elements as of now are down. The time will tell how they adapt their business models and whether they come back or not.
This is a question from Kavish Mishra. Kavish asks, since agencies handle different clients simultaneously, but PR and marketing professionals from companies do focus only on the effective communication of the company. So Kavish wants to know if there's any difference in the approach in delivery message. And do you think today YouTube also plays a major role in generating awareness? Abhilasha, would you like to take this?
Sure. So, a communications professional is a communication professional. I don't think the approach can be different if you're on the agency side or you've been on the corporate side. Of course, being in an agency gives you a vaster outlook into, you have multiple clients, so your measurement matrix or your communication reassessment is going to have that kind of an experience. But I think what needs to be done is for corporate teams to work with their agencies and to come to a common point where it is a collaborative effort. And again, going back to the fact of what I mentioned earlier, in an agency or in a corporate, if you can get insights about what is your target audience, who is the message going out to, what is your client what is your user thinking about, it will help you formulate your messages and campaigns better, whichever side. And the question on YouTube, well, of course, anything that is social right now is a great platform. So is YouTube, depending on how you're planning to use YouTube. If you've never done your own channel, this might not be the right time, but leveraging influencers and existing channels on YouTube can be a good approach to go ahead with. And if you already have an own channel, which has seen enough traction, well, then you're already winning the game.
There's one question from Deepankar Zalpuri. And this is to anyone. Apart from digital, what are the most preferred communication medium clients would take post COVID-19? Let's look at answering it from the measurement angle. Which is the medium जिसमें और भी समझदारी है?
I'm sorry,
The question is outside digital.
Sorry?
I've not understood the question.
The question is outside of digital.
Outside of digital. Which is the medium which was going to be used most as a communication tool post COVID-19?
I think so. We kind of discussed that twofold. One is, I think own channels are going to be very important. So digital is a medium, but corporates' own channels are going to be more important, and companies would communicate directly with their stakeholders. And secondly, even the IRS figures, etc., show that regional is going to be more important. So I think rather than just relying on national footprint, region-specific issues might get different, because again, you'll get into red, green, and orange zones, and how each state is different. So today, the issues that are prevalent in consumers' minds in, say, Bihar are very different to somebody in Maharashtra, to somebody, say, in Madhya Pradesh. So I think depending on the need, again, brands and campaigns might become more regional, because the distinction between regions, because of what COVID brings, is going to be starker in what is important in a geography, and that will matter. You can't give the same message if health is such a big issue in Maharashtra versus a green zone in Kerala, where you could take more liberty.
Great, thank you, Rishi. There's a question from Mansi Gupta, which starts off saying, mostly all panelists emphasize that building or strengthening trust through marketing and communication campaigns will be very important in the current scenario. How can parameters like these be measured? I can think of surveys. Anything else? Ram, would you like to take this?
Yeah, in terms of, in some way, when we talk of trust and we talk of measurement, yeah, it's difficult to build an analogy of saying in a crisis situation like this, how are we going to measure how we are building trust? Having said that, a few quick thoughts. Yeah, I think the larger principle of saying this is the time to consolidate and strengthen trust is more about what is the approach we take to communications overall in the first place as a starting point. I think that's the principle from where trust becomes very important. In terms of how we measure the tactics and the actions that we take as a result, yeah, is where measurement will come. Yeah. For example, let's take an example of a stakeholder. It will become easier to illustrate the point. Let's take the example of an employee as a stakeholder. Yeah. For a company like UltraTech, where we have 55 manufacturing units, 255 offices across the country, in addition to a few international operations, the fact that the employees are dispersed, they're not in offices, they work from home. The challenge of how are we engaging them, yeah, and in this very difficult situation, what are the actions we are taking, and how, what is one at a very, at the outset, as Aseem said, even before you take the actions, how do you understand their expectations? For example, there itself, the measurement tools and technologies come in. That's something that we did quite extensively right at the outset to try and figure out what are the anxieties, concerns, and expectations of the employees from the company. We basis that insights, not just as us as comms, but HR in the driver's seat, yeah, and we as partners of HR. A certain number of actions were taken, and all through at intervals of time, because this is not a typical peacetime situation where you fix a periodicity for your measurement. Yeah, that's the second point that I would like to share here. You will have a sense of when you need to do it, probably more often than you would otherwise do. Yeah, with the context of employees. Yeah, because it's easier to engage with them. Yeah, and then you.
Thanks. We're running out of time. I have one or two more questions. Students of SCoRe, so they are organizing this. We need to ask the questions. Many brands are now being forced to measure their reputation on hearts and minds instead of business results. Do you think this attitude will stick around after things get back to normal? Sarah, will you like to take this? Hearts and minds versus harsh reality.
No, I'm not sure I understand the question.
You know, the reputation is being measured on hearts and minds instead of business results is what Vaishali Banerjee, a student of SCoRe, says. So do you think this attitude will stick around after things get back to normal?
See, I think it depends on the company again. Like I said at the beginning also, I think for every company, it's different right now. There are many companies who are in survival mode. So they want to make sure that they are being seen and they're not out of sight, out of mind. There are other companies who are dealing with business realities. So you're just trying to keep pace and make sure that you're seen, giving the right messages. So it really is dependent from company to company, and I don't think it's. Of course, there are some companies who are doing comms for the sake of it right now. It might make sense to not do stuff, just to sit back and let this tie through, or do things which are more effective and clear, like I said, clear and relevant and useful. But I think if people are also very anxious right now, so as things settle down, I do feel that there will be a certain amount of normalcy that will come back into play, and hopefully it'll not be agenda driven wherever it is.
Great, thank you, Sarah. And I thought I would go around the panel and ask them this question in terms of what do you think should be the measurement priorities? What could be takeaways from this discussion? A set of measurement priorities that you think are appropriate given the new normal that exists. Would you like to start, Aseem, since we'll go in the reverse order?
If I were to choose one, then I will say articulating the changes that you're making to your communications objectives is the most important thing. If you do this right, everything will flow. Everything will fall in place. Measurement program will be very, very successful. But if this is not articulated clearly, and in fact, force yourself to write it. If you don't write it, you will not get it right.
But I'm going to ask this question: is articulating, it sounds good, but is it really easy given the fact that, as Sarah said, things keep changing, right? You have guidelines, notifications, all of that keeps changing.
Right. And therefore, Ram said something very interesting. The most important thing in the entire exercise is the why. Why are we doing what we are doing? And as long as you're not clear about why are you doing what you're doing, how will you measure whether you're successful or not?
Rishi, your takeaway?
So I think in this time, and it's going to be important to have an integrated measurement. Silos are out. And the second is agile. It needs to move very fast. And third is, time static measurement, as what he said, report card methods are going to move out because it's going to be difficult to measure time period based, performance. It's going to be more on issue narratives and agenda that you're trying to push.
Abhilasha?
So, if we can take a step back and see ourselves on the other side of this, there's one thing that will stick with all of us. Consumers, users, the population in general is going to be spooked out. So for brands at this point in time, it is critical they'll remember how these brands behave. So it is very, very critical for them to care for these people and to narrate everything back to the purpose. That is one thing, that sticks with me. The second thing, the question on hearts and minds. When you win hearts and minds, it will show on business results. And it will show on measurement metrics. It will show on your success metrics as well. So in terms of messaging, it needs to be right where your audience sit and target it towards them as to what their needs are. Second is, as Rishi mentioned, agility and speed of information gathering and the use of technology to attain that is very, very critical. And that is something that's going to stick with us on the other side of this crisis.
Ram, very quick answer from you.
Yeah, I think in a situation like this, what is very critical is listening and understanding the expectations of our stakeholders. And from that perspective, if you look at measurement, the leading indicators of measuring stakeholder expectations even before we take action. I think that's very, very critical.
Sarah, last but not the least, your view?
So I actually have a couple of things. One is based on experience and my personal experience. I think what tends to happen is once a crisis is over, I think people forget the amount of work that goes into managing it, and it's very important for all of us as communication professionals to know what all we did. And I know this sounds really it sounds extremely tactical, but at the end of the day, 6 months down the line, if I asked you what happened on well, today's May 13th, you may not have an answer ready by just absolutely. So I feel this one piece is to keep track of what we're doing. Also, there is a lot that is there is a lot of learning that has happened in this time frame. There have been a lot of partnerships that have been forged within teams. Working remotely has actually brought teams together in a very strange way. Some of these learnings need to be brought to the fore. And from a measurement perspective, I think it's going to be about how the brands are perceived at the end of it. How were they, like Abhilasha said, how did they communicate externally? Were they driving their own agenda? Were they just bulldozing down with their own perspective, or were they cognizant of what else was happening in the environment when they were doing this piece? So I think these are some broad aspects that will probably be of relevance in my view.
Aseem, there's an interesting question that has come in, and I thought you should answer this before we do the final recap. How do we measure the effectiveness of leadership, executive communication, especially internal?
Especially internal?
Yeah.
Oh. I think it'll have to be done using internal employee interviews. And this will have to be done when you taking feedback, when you're doing a 360-degree feedback for the team, and that's when you can collect this feedback.
Anybody else has a view on this?
So,
yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, so if I can just put my 2 bits over here, having worked in corporates, I think most corporates use tools which survey employees on a quarterly, 6-monthly basis to understand how the leadership has performed in terms of the communications, in terms of the behavior. And that, in my experience, has worked out really well, not just in terms of immediate reactions from the team, but immediate reaction from the organization as a whole, to give constructive feedback to leadership where required, or to appreciate them where not. And these codes are quite coveted within corporates, and I'm sure both Ram and Sarah would be able to add to it as well.
Ram, would you like to say something?
So 2 points in addition to the tools that are used through surveys, focus groups, and all of that. 2 quick points. One is, the campaign or the engagement that we do with employees, they themselves can be means of understanding the employee sentiment. Yeah. And that can work beautifully because the employee is not complying to a survey, but expressing themselves. And I think that's a wonderful way to get understand employee sentiment and expectations for the leaders. The second one, which may not be very directly with comms, but through HR, most organizations have a very strong HR network. And leveraging the HR network in a situation like this to constantly engage employees, of course, not over-engage, but constantly engage employees and get a pulse, a feel of what the employee sentiments are, emotions are, concerns are, anxieties are, I think is very critical for comms itself as much as for the leaders.
And tell me, how does internal comms play a role, especially when these days communications also could mean job cuts or pay cuts?
Let me give a very simple example. Are you part of the critical conversations? I think Sarah also mentioned that. Yeah. If you are, then your ability to add value, yeah, through what you do for the organization increases. So let me give an example. For example, if you're talking about employee communications or internal communications, if you're most organizations are having this daily huddles and calls. Is comms part of those critical conversations where they have an understanding of the dynamics and insights, what exactly the organization, the leaders, the HR teams are trying to do? Then the comms ability to input one to what the organization needs to do to engage with employees, or what they can design through their expertise. I think both will work well. And I think in a lot of organizations, for example, within ABG, that works beautifully well. Yeah, and I expect that that is true for most organizations.
Thanks. Any other final comments? We have a minute more to go. Anybody else would like to say something? Aseem, is measurement. Any final word to people as to how they should measure themselves before talking of measurement?
Okay, so for companies who are busy, extremely busy, and doing a lot of new communication campaigns, for them, it's very important that they spend time on measurement because they're doing a lot of work. For companies who do not have a lot of work and not running any campaigns, in fact, they also have so much time available, they should invest that time in measurement. And the best part about measurement is you can actually do it yourself. You don't need a third party to do it for you. You only need somebody to execute a campaign that you may have started, even for a measurement campaign. So if you are able to clearly think through what you're doing or how you're running a campaign, and if you are able to do it as in plan it better, this is the right time to do it now.
But measurement is also considered as a kind of a barometer of how comms is doing or how marketing is doing. So one is always looking at people like yourselves with a bit of care, right?
So, we do measurement campaigns for our clients in two parts. When it comes to insights and learning, there are times when measurement is done only for that purpose and it is not used as a report card at all. And that makes it very, very welcoming from all people involved in communications team.
This discussion, we could just go on and on. I think, we've spent 90 minutes here in this discussion, and clearly we found some answers, and there are quite a few questions which are still there. Clearly, this is the new normal. We don't know what's going to happen next. As Sarah said, notifications keep coming, flying in and flying out. I really don't know whether a Flipkart is delivering to us in Mumbai, but whatever it is, this is where we are. And, several things that one can do, just that, we need to be safe in every possible way, safe in our personal lives, safe in our business, and safe with measurement. Thank you very much. Over to you, Hemant.
Thanks so much, Pradyuman. And thank you to all the panelists for taking the time out for this conversation. Thanks to all the attendees who joined us on Zoom and YouTube. Apologies if we couldn't take your question. This webinar will be available on our YouTube channel by tomorrow, so you can share it with anyone who may have missed it. We host these conversations every Wednesday evening, and our next webinar is our first international panel discussing what brands across geographies are doing to prepare for the lockdown and beyond. We'll be hosting Douglas Dew of BCW, ST Puyadas of Ketchum, Margaret Key of MSL, and Tarun Deo of Golin in conversation with Tuhina Pandey, who's the head of communications for IBM India and South Asia. You'll find more details about this on our Twitter page, so do sign up for this. Once again, thanks a lot for joining. Thanks to our panelists, and I hope to see you all next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you so much.